Here are 10 different books that were published in 1980s in Poland. All of them are from the same sci-fi and fantasy genre, but only half of them are official publications, which makes half of these books illegal. The books you see here were made for Polish science fiction clubs. According to the law during communism in Poland, they could make 100 copies for internal use only. Forget about copyright or for that matter a professional translation. They become known as Klubówka, which comes from the word club. But did they really make 100 copies? Of course not. At first they did, making small batches of books for hungry science fiction and fantasy readers, up until the second half of the 80s, when so-called people with connections joined the printing venture. To understand the need for Klubówka, you should know there was no other option available, even though in England they had been available for decades. Books like Isaac Asimov Foundation series, which was published by Gnome Press in 1951 and in Poland in 1985, 34 years later, as Klubówka. The same thing happened to Conan, written by Robert Howard, or The Stainless Steel Rat by Harrison, books by Ursula Le Guin, H.P. Lovecraft, Robert Sheckley, George R.R. Martin, Star Wars series. These and many more had their first publication in Polish as Klubówka Prints. So how did you make Klubówka in the 80s, in Poland, during the time of martial law and fall of communism, when it was prohibited to have printing equipment and even paper and ink was rationed by the state? First, you had to get a copy of the original book, usually an English version. This could be sent by an uncle from America or with some luck found in the antiquarian bookshop. Again, it just wasn't easy at that time. Then a translation was made. This was usually done by a club member, often with no experience whatsoever. The draft translation was later edited on the typescript and then written again on an electric typewriter. The text prepared this way was sent to a friend's printing house, where on duplicators and often with a stolen paper it was printed, folded and stapled. The classic look of Klubówka is in a typewriter font, often faded due to diluted ink from the offset printers and sometimes barely even visible. The first pages of books contain the messages do użytku wewnętrznego and nakład 100 egzemplarzy, which means for the organization's internal use only and circulation 100 copies. Often this is the only information we can find in the book. It was typical for Klubówka not to include the translator's name or year of the publication. Another characteristic is visible corrections, or, as in this case, a duplicate of the page crossed out. Some books come with original illustrations, or, as in Battlestar Galactica, a photographic print. The book cover design is often taken from the work of artists such as Boris Vallejo, or from the film posters, but sometimes they have original illustrations made specially for the print. These CONAN booklets were printed in 1984 in around 300 copies, which was breaking the rule allowing the print of only 100 copies. The illustrations were made by the publisher and were printed on grey cardboard, which was purchased with 1 kilogram of Polish sausages. It was just the way things got done. A typical Klubówka was extremely expensive to buy. It was usually purchased by the club's library and the books were read by many people. Sometimes there was a very short time limit for how long you could keep the book, like just for one day. For a long time, SB, the Polish equivalent to the Soviet KGB, was not interested in illegal Klubówka prints, as it was focusing mainly on the anti-governmental publications called Bibuła. But somewhere between 1985 and 1986, Polish secret police could no longer ignore it and began to arrest people under the accusation of publishing without a permit. And when that happened, 2 members of 2 different sci-fi and fantasy clubs met in a prison cell. That was the beginning of an idea to build a new, legal publishing house that became one of the biggest in Poland. Klubówka, like communism, ended in 1989, and almost immediately the newborn publishing house that started in the prison cell began to print books. There was no longer a need for pirated copies of books in Poland.